what I'm trying to say here is everything that we experienced to this point, we needed to experience so that we can help the collective. And it isn't just about us anymore. As much as we do identify and individualize, we need that individualized work so that we can come in coherence with the grander collective story.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cosmic Heartist. I am so excited to be recording another overview episode with Thea. This month, of course, we're doing a December overview. It is the last month of 2024. It kind of feels like this month has gone really fast and really slow at the same time. No matter what has gone on in your life, I'm sure it's been really, really, really transformative this year. I feel like has tested all of us in many different ways based on all the conversations that I've had this year. I feel like everyone that I've talked to has had to deal with something difficult. So for December, I hope you're being tender and compassionate with yourself because we have a lot of movements again, as per the usual, but we're in Sag season, and Sag is all about expansion, and Sag is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter reminds us to have faith and to trust the journey. And so here we are trusting the journey. But I think personally, and I feel like they would agree, that it's easier to trust the journey when we kind of have an idea of what's going on in the sky, because as above, so below. But before we jump into December, hi Thea, how are you doing today? How was November for you, if you would like to give us 3 words? And then let's slide into December.
Sure. Hello. Hello again, everyone. I can't believe it's December. Time just flew by. And I remember in October, we were just talking about how we can work with time. Or was that last month? I don't even remember anymore. But November for me was celebratory. I'm a Sag. I'm a lot of Sagittarius. So celebrating all those Sagittarius in me. It was also very, it was celebratory. It was reflective, and it was very, um, it was a respite. Like, just, I felt calm and at peace, even in the chaos and even being in the center of the storm. It felt like an eye of the storm moment for me. That was November's chaos and all those movements and all those shifts. But, the gift of astrology is, I feel like, a gift that keeps giving, because the deeper we understand, the more we are able to, like Karina said, have faith and trust in the movement, and that all of this is happening for us instead of everything happening to us and around us. Just taking a sense of ownership and responsibility for how we are also co-creating and the stories that are happening for us is a big lesson for me this week. How about you? How was November for you?
Ooh, November. Honestly, I don't even know where it went. I feel like we just stepped into November. Um, hmm. Oh, definitely tender, because in November we celebrated Diwali. This is the first one without my dad, so that was very tender, um, purposeful, and in November, well, a lot of this year, but in November specifically, why? Like we were talking about before we started recording, my why has come out a lot louder, or the questioning of my why, which obviously usually happens with Sagittarius season once we like start stepping into what's deeper, right? Why are we doing what we're doing?
Mm,
So November has me asking, or had me asking the bigger questions, which I feel like I will answer through December. So it kind of felt like a stage. November felt like
mm,
a stage for December to kind of dance on before the
mm,
year
mm,
ends. Even though the year isn't really ending, I mean, considering that we're astrologers, we know that the new year
mm.
begins with the Aries new moon. But the new year does feel like the new year for some reason this year, much more than last year, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And that's actually something that I'm looking forward to unpack with you. for this month?
Yeah, okay, I'm excited. So last month, we did not invite Mercury to our conversation, and we really had to pay the price. So, we're beginning this month. And if you're like, what are you talking about? It's because Mercury is responsible for communication and technology and our thoughts, and our words just were not flowing last month. Again, because we didn't invite Mercury. And as we record this, we're recording this on December 2. Mercury is in retrograde. So I'm going to update you a little bit about what Mercury is doing through the month, very briefly. So, because Mercury is in retrograde, it means that Mercury went through aspects while Mercury was moving direct or forward or its natural motion. And then it's going to be going through the same thing again, making these same aspects for the second time while Mercury is in retrograde or appears to be moving backward. And then it will be doing it one more time for the last time, that is later this month. To see, okay, you went through it while Mercury was in direct, but in shadow. You went through it while Mercury was in retrograde. Can you imagine? It makes sense. Retro crazy. And now, how are you going to handle it now that Mercury is direct again? Is what's going to be later this month. So I'll break it down very briefly. Thea, I would love if you can also chime in with what you think. But the dances are Mercury is going to be trining, so harmonious aspect to Chiron, which is in Aries, and Chiron in Aries is, I feel, bringing out our wounding, our triggers. So it's like Mercury is going to be harmoniously working with our triggers and our wounding, perhaps giving us language for what we're dealing with inside, and maybe giving us the ability to turn it into medicine, especially during the third time that we have the transit, which is later this month. And then I'll explain this too in a second. And then we have Mercury sextile Lilith. And again, Mercury is communication. Lilith is our raw inner power, and Lilith currently is in Libra. So this will be like our thoughts and our communication, really learning, I feel like, the raw carnal ability that we have to defend. And like, it doesn't specifically say what we're defending. It could be anything. But with Libra, it's like, stand up for something. What are you standing up for? And Mercury in Sag is also like, what are you standing up for? So I think this will be an oomph of energy because the sextile is also harmonious. And then we have Mercury opposite Jupiter. Mercury in Sagittarius, expansive, Jupiter in Gemini, also expansive, but I feel like this could look like a lot of information. So I think the importance here will be distilling and digesting the information that we're receiving. And then Mercury will be, and also realizing how capable we are of doing such big things. Because come on, Mercury in Sag, opposite Jupiter, who is Sag's ruler in Gemini, it feels big. But it feels like when this aspect is made while Mercury is in retrograde, it will feel very frictiony, very testing, just because it will be a lot. Versus when Mercury is finally direct, it will be a little more, okay, this is what I learned. And then lastly, Mercury is going to be squaring Saturn in Pisces. Saturn has been teaching us lots of lessons while Saturn was in retrograde and stationed direct last month, which we talked about in the November overview. And this one I feel would be more like, how are we taking accountability for what we said that we were going to do, and coming back to our why are we doing what we're doing anyway? With Saturn and Pisces, I feel we can't force ourselves to be accountable when we don't know the deeper why, because Saturn's like, what's your purpose anyway? And Pisces is the complete end of a cycle. And then, so all these aspects will be happening. I don't want to give dates because I don't want to overwhelm, but these are overall themes. And then once Mercury stations direct on the 16th, after that, these same aspects will be coming into our attention. So then it will go in reverse order. So we'll have Mercury squaring Saturn again, and then Mercury opposite Jupiter again, and then Mercury sextile Lilith again, and then Mercury trine Chiron again, bringing up all the same themes that we just talked about. So just look for these themes throughout December. And when they do come up, don't get overwhelmed because you know that they're coming up. Thea, what would you like to add about Mercury before we go into the other aspects of the month?
I feel like this is such a beautiful bookend to what came up for us in April. That first Mercury retrograde we had in Aries was conjunct. And here in December, where it's in a harmonious aspect to Chiron, how are we integrating? How are we integrating and reintegrating all those lessons and all those revelations around, our identity, our trauma stories, our deeper why, as Karina was bringing up? And as we end this year, I think this was also something that we were talking about before we recorded, is how December this year feels like just an expansive beginning. And very much, I mean, the astrology of December, we actually have two new moons. We have a new moon as we started the month on December 1, and we have another new moon on December 31. That's a Capricorn new moon. So the expanded visions and truths and explorations that we are experiencing during December gives us a more grounded and rooted approach as we end December because we're beginning a new year. Although again, as astrologers, we know that the seasonal new year isn't until April and we're entering the dead of winter as the year closes. I feel like it's such a beautiful opportunity for us to reflect and, like I said, reintegrate the lessons. And as we ask ourselves these deeper questions of why we're doing what we're doing, why do we desire such desire, we can come up with a more practical and grounded approach as we enter the new year.
Practical and grounded. Ah, what a gift! What a what a gift of a feeling. I feel like to I don't know, just revel in because I feel like it's not been a lot of grounding. It's been a lot of movement, a lot of movement with the fire and with the air, especially with Pluto moving into Aquarius and everyone being so excited about Pluto moving into Aquarius. I feel like there's been a lack of grounding energy. So I'm excited to have this second new moon later this month to
Mhm.
to help us ground in. But let's dip deeper into December. We'll go through days that feel especially important, and then give maybe some practical advice. So again, we're recording this on the 2nd of December, but I want to kind of talk about yesterday because yesterday we had the new moon in Sagittarius, which was on the 1st of December, Philippine time. All the times that we give or all the dates that we give are based on Philippine time because Thea and I are both in the Philippines. So the new moon in Sagittarius was yesterday at 9 degrees 32 minutes of Sagittarius at 2:21 p.m. And it was so fun. Yesterday I opened my time passages app. I was journaling and then I opened my time passages app and I looked at the chart and it said that the sun was at 9 degrees and the moon was at 9 degrees. So I was like, it's the new moon right now. And it's just so exciting when that happens. Like I wasn't really sure when it was, what time, whatever, but then I opened time passages and it was like, it's now. And it gave me that oomph of, oh my God, what am I going to do today to, celebrate this new moon? Because it's conjunct my north node at to the degree 9 degrees of Sagittarius. So how do you feel about the new moon? What do you think is the kind of energy that this new moon is ushering us into this month? And also yesterday we had Jupiter in Gemini trining, so harmonious aspect, Lilith in Libra.
Mm. Mhm. Well, in esoteric and galactic astrology, 9 degrees is actually where Antares, the heart of the scorpion. And Sagittarius is actually where the center of the galaxy, where our Earth, our viewpoint from the Earth, opens up to the center of the galaxy. We call that the galactic center. And the exact position of the galactic center is at 27 degrees Sagittarius. 9 degrees is where Antares is. 13, 14 degrees is where the great attractor is. So these are major galactic points that open us up to the rest of the galaxy. And for us to have a new moon right at the heart of the Scorpion, we were talking about our why, right? And I think this is something that we're going to keep repeating during like this episode is what is the heart of you? What is the heart of the matter? What is the heart where you ground yourself and your intentions and your visions from? And to have that new moon in the heart of the galaxy, the question, I guess, as we envision, as we expand and launch ourselves into this grand adventure, Sagittarius rules adventure. And as I'm saying this, I feel like the environment around me is just going crazy with construction and airplanes and helicopters that I hope you don't hear. Um, and also the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, is in a sign where it's not comfortable in. It's in Gemini, and Jupiter doesn't really like Gemini so much. In traditional astrology, it's not comfortable in Gemini. It's in detriment because Gemini wants for us to go into the details, to understand the details, understand the polarities and the dualities and be curious. Jupiter just wants to know, wants to believe, wants to expand, wants to envision big things. I feel like that square to Saturn enters, and the square to Saturn, and then we're gonna have a Saturnian new moon at the end of the month. We have this month, we have a grand cycle where we expand within bounds, although we have an out of bounds new moon. And then I'll touch up on out of bounds later on. We are expanding within bounds. We are learning how to expand within contraction because Saturn in Pisces really teaches us how to ground our dreams into this reality, this version of reality. And as we enter 2025 in the middle of the decade, we are, each and every one of us, are just going to be held more accountable and responsible to ground those dreams. So this month, with that new moon, what are your grand visions? What grand adventure do you want to set out to? But what are the practical strategies wherein you can expand within the bounds? And when I say bounds with this out of bounds new moon, we are stretching the limits of this. We are going beyond conscious thought. We are in the age of Aquarius. Oh my gosh, we are just expanding everything. We are creating new myths. We are creating new narratives. How might we do that with our feet on the ground? Right? And there's such a lesson on pullback this month also with Mars stationing retrograde. We'll touch up on that later, definitely. But there's this energy of pullback. And in archery, when you pull back, you kind of also have to feel the pullback on your hips and on your legs. What Sagittarius rules the hips, right? How stable and grounded and squared off are your hips when you do that? Because the pulling back isn't just an upper body thing. It also has core, it has hips, and it has knees. So all those things I feel like are very important as we direct and pull back on our arrows and aim our arrows wherever we intend to aim it. We have to make sure that our feet are actually grounded and our knees are stable and our hips are squared. I think there's also a bunch of yoga there. Before we do our warrior pose, we have to make sure that our hips are squared off and we're actually facing center. We're in our center of gravity. And what is gravity for you? How are you holding your center of gravity? What is the heart of everything that you're trying to do? These are questions I would like for us to start with as we begin the month.
I love that vision of an archer pulling back. It does really feel like we're right there. And I'm looking at the journal entry that I wrote this morning because I'm thinking about how you said we're in the middle of a decade. And I just remember that this morning I was writing about what next year is going to look like. So I wrote that I feel like this year was one of experimentation and play, and next year is one of setting foundations down while still playing. 2025 feels like the beginning of taking things to a new level, which it really
Mm-hmm.
does. It feels like the beginning of, something fresh, something new, something different. But at the same time, with something new, something fresh, and something different, we need to have foundations. And as we're both talking about, the foundation for us is just, I feel like, knowing why we're doing what we're doing, especially when Sagittarius comes to play. It's what is your purpose? Where is your arrow pointing? As an archer, where is your arrow pointing? How can you be radically honest about your authenticity? How can you be so radically authentic that people never doubt what you're saying because your words are so embodied and so true, and you're so, like, you're backing up your words just by existing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like that is the oomph that comes with this new moon. It's very embodied. I know it's fire, so it's inspirational and it's empowering, but it's also very, I think the goal of it is very embodied, so that it's not like far out. Because with Sagittarius, like you're saying, we're at this place that we're close to the great attractor and to the galactic center. So it's like we're at such a big like precipice, or like precipice, but area of the sky, that if we don't know why we're doing what we're doing, it's really easy to kind of just get sucked into so many things, especially with the energy of the month. Like, it's playful, it's fresh. We have Pluto and Aquarius. So I think it's really important to know why. What is the why? So, stepping into December, I feel like that's one of the biggest questions that we're going to be coming back to again and again. And then the next big thing that's happening that I want to talk about is the 5th of December, where we have the Sun in Sagittarius squaring Saturn in Pisces. So a square is a bit of a tense aspect, right? It kind of, think of a square, it pushes you to the corner so that you can look at things through a different perspective. So we have the Sun, which is overall ego, radiance, sun. We wouldn't have light without the sun, squaring Saturn. Saturn is responsible for discipline and accountability and doing our work. But Saturn is in Pisces, so work looks very different. I feel like when Saturn is in Pisces, it's not so much about get the shit done. It's more about again. I mean, I think we're going to keep coming back again and again, but it's more about purpose. It's more about what is your purpose for wanting to get it done with Pisces. But Thea, how are you seeing this Sun square Saturn? I know it's a pretty pivotal time when we have the Sun squaring Saturn.
It does. It's a reality check of what kind of reality and fantasy are you spending most of your time in. Okay, so astronomically, this part of the sky, 13 degrees, opens up to just thousands of other galaxies. If the galactic center opens us up to the rest of the Milky Way, then that's just our planets, right? This opens us up to 1,000 more galaxies. So where are we? And I feel like, and I'm not sure, but I just feel like we are in this period of time where, as Pluto is in the not even first degree of Aquarius, we're getting revelations and information around supergalactic federation. And I don't know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by heart, but I'm not sure how people are talking about aliens nowadays, where they're talking about aliens, where exposures around extraterrestrial life are coming in. But I feel like with Saturn, with this square, the invitation is to feel how much supported we are to actually ground our delusions and facts. And also get really realistic how delulu we're being. And that it's okay to forgive ourselves. Saturn and Pisces teaches us forgiveness and reconciliation. To forgive ourselves if we have fantasies that are overboard. It's Sagittarius season. Freaking dream wild. But remember that Sagittarius, as the centaur, the archetypal centaur, we need to remember our wild nature as much as our human nature, and that we are both, right? Jupiter in Gemini reminds us we are both end. And we can be all of this at once. The expansion is also, again, within the contraction and realizing that we don't break. Saturn in Pisces breaks us open. So how and what have we been broken open into, right? Where have we been breaking down to realize that it's just expanding our capacity to hold more space for everything? Joy as much as grief, excitement as much as fear, and that how might we reconcile all these parts of us? Because it is in reintegrating and remembering, putting back together all these parts of us that we can actually be more grounded and take a squared off approach and understand where our center is. But that takes a different level of understanding after the breaking open and the disintegration, which is also a Saturn and Pisces thing. How and what have we disintegrated from our orbits the past year? And how are we reintegrating again? And how are we taking responsibility? It can feel tense because it's a square aspect, but what we always talk about when we talk about squares, it's a creative tension. So where we are feeling tense is an invitation for us to get more creative. And since it's in Sagittarius and Pisces, it wants us to zoom out and see things from a different perspective, see things from a bigger picture, and then zoom back in. Is what I'm feeling.
When you were starting off and talking about what kind of fantasy are we living in, I also want to point out that we all live in our own worlds. Like we all have our own worlds that we create. And so if you're feeling like you're a little bit delulu and you're happy about it, keep doing it. You know, if that's the kind of world that you want to live in, because I feel like this day is a reminder that our beliefs create our reality. And so just if you want to make some changes, if you want your reality to look a little bit different, I think practically this is a great day to journal about what are the beliefs that you've been holding on to, if not for just this last year, maybe since the beginning of 2020, maybe since the pandemic. You know, a lot of time, a lot of us, I think that's the last time that we properly checked in with ourselves during the pandemic, because we had so much time on our hands that we were like, okay, now what? Which is why so many of us have pandemic stories, so many things that we changed in our lives during the pandemic. So this is another opportunity to go in and be like, okay, it's been 4 years. We're about to be on
Mm-hmm.
2020 in 2025. What are the beliefs that I'm holding? And how are these beliefs contributing to the reality that I live in? And if I love it, freaking amazing. And if I don't love it, how can I start training myself to decondition from these beliefs so that I can put in new belief systems? And then on the next day, actually, it's really big as well because that is Mercury Cazimi, which means Mercury is in the heart of the sun while Mercury is retrograde. And that is at 14 degrees, 27 minutes of Sagittarius. So, like you said, still very close to the centers of the universe where we can just access way more. Like, I'm just trying to envision what that feels like. And I feel like our universe or our earth is like this slimy blob. I mean, I just watched Moana 2, not too last week probably, but it's like these animated visions of like, you know, big slimy blobs that have mouths. And then it's like so many things are coming into the mouth. You can also imagine it as a video game. So yeah, I feel like this is the potential to receive a lot of really cool downloads, a lot of really cool thoughts, a lot of expansive ways of looking at your world and looking at the way you use your words. With this retrograde, again, similar to the day before, it's a great day to, or with this Cazimi, it's a great day to look at your beliefs, look at your words. Thea and I, before we clicked record, were talking about how our words really shape our reality. When you write something down, when you anchor it in, it's so easy to magnetize it when we get out of our own way and instead just kind of keep doing what feels good to do. When we push into resistance, or if you are in a place where you are giving into a lot of resistance, I feel on this day you will meet even more resistance. Versus if you're in a place where you're allowing things to flow, you're allowing yourself to be open. This is also a day where you can get a lot of ideas and a lot of inspiration. How do you feel about this Mercury Cazimi?
I love that. And I love everything you said about deconditioning our truths and our beliefs. And also, we're getting this month is the second Jupiter Saturn square. And that has a lot to do with, again, deconditioning the truth and the delusions that we have believed. So with this Mercury Cazimi, we are starting a new Mercury cycle in Sagittarius and in a potent area of the sky. So probably again, ask yourself those questions. What have I been believing? What have I been enrolling? What beliefs have I allowed myself to enroll into that are actually just superstitions? That they're actually not truth, but I trained myself and conditioned myself to believe that they're true. And how might you now use the same truths, but empower you to create new belief structures for yourself because you know that they're just superstitions, they're not beliefs. Especially when it comes to with Saturn and Sagittarius there, when it comes to how you empower your doubts, your guilt, your shame, your quote unquote responsibility and obligation to shrink yourself so that you can hold space for other people more than you do yourself. How are you believing these superstitions? And how can you actually break yourself up from, right? We were talking about we're breaking open, we're breaking through. How might you break yourself up from those superstitions and set yourself up to a grander, like a grander turning for your year as we reach the middle of the decade is what's coming.
Okay, with you talking about superstitions, I'm realizing that Sagittarius is religious
Mhm.
territory. So, going back to the 5th, I want to say that's also a great day to think about whether you are religious or spiritual and how to use the religion as a stepping stone to become spiritual. Because at the end of the day, we all are spiritual because we have spirits. This is something I've been saying since 2020 when I had this podcast as an IG live called Highly Spiritual. We're all spiritual beings. You remember that, Thea? You were my first guest for Highly Spiritual.
Do I remember?
That was probably the first conversation that we had with each other, and that's wild. That's like 4 or 5 years ago at this point. And this podcast clearly has changed so much since then. We went from highly spiritual to cosmic heartist. We're talking about spirituality, and then we're going just so deep into our hearts. So, also, I want to say that um, when you were taught, I have to. I'm so sorry, but I have to. I have to bring up religion. I have to bring up religion because I have to bring up mass and the words that are said during mass. Things like, Lord, I am not worthy to receive you, but
And my
just say the
body
word.
is like, oh,
Right. So I just want to say, like, if you do go to mass, I'm not judging you. Please, like, if that's what serves you, that's totally fine. Like, we all just need to do what we need to do to come back to peace, to come back to our own hearts. But I just want to give you a note to be aware of the words that you're using. Again, because words create our reality. And if you're saying something like, Lord, I'm not worthy to receive you, I don't know, because we already have God within us. So why are we saying we're not worthy to receive God if we already have God? And if we want to receive God, then why are we saying I'm not? Like, be really, really smart about the words that you're saying about yourself, especially when I is involved. When you say I, be so clear about what comes after, because I feel if it's a negation, then that's kind of what we're magnetizing, more negations. But if it's a affirmation, then we're also magnetizing more affirmations. I really had to. I'm sorry if this offends anybody. Anyway, go Thea.
no, but thank you because I'm looking at the chart now and we have a loose kite, the Cazimi, and the apex of the kite is Jupiter and Gemini. And um, let me use my words, and I am gonna stop looking at the chart because there's just a bunch of messages that are coming up to me. But to put that in perspective and in context, in the context of our psychology, like Philippine psychology, and how everyone is talking about decolonization and how colonization through religion has been so deeply ingrained in each and every one of us. And there's actually no decolonization if there's no review and deconditioning of our religious truth. And I feel like this loose kite with Vesta in Libra, um, and then the moon in Aquarius, of course, the Cazimi, in Sagittarius opposite. Jupiter and Gemini, we are really being invited to just, again, I really feel like the breaking open because these are like Jupiter in Gemini is right in our, this is cast, like this chart is cast in Manila. So Philippines, Jupiter in Gemini is right in our nadir, in our IC. That's the home and the roots. And with Jupiter in Gemini there, how are we reviewing the truths that have actually been imposed onto us? And then Saturn in Pisces is on the horizon. It's rising, and at the midheaven is where the Cazimi is. So it's directing us right at noon. And so, yeah, how might we liberate ourselves from the truths that have conditioned us, from the beliefs that have conditioned us? And religion isn't the only thing that have conditioned us, right? There are a lot of cultural superstitions, and it's holiday season. But it's reunion season. We're meeting with our friends and our family again, our families of origin. What have our origin stories? How do they look like? And how might we lovingly, decondition ourselves from origin stories, but find reconciliation as we weave into new stories and new myths and new adventures for ourselves? There's a certain wisdom that Jupiter teaches us. And with this Jupiter Saturn square, and we have that Cazimi, there's a loose grand cross. And when we talk about grand cross, there's there's an inward and outward pressure that seeks for us to find resolution from the inside, not actually from the outside. It can seem like there's so many things that are coming up on the outside, so many varying and polarizing views. But what is your truth in the inside? And that's actually the whole Sagittarius lesson. Find your truth and learn to embrace your truth because it is valid too. Your experience is your experience and your experience alone. It can always be tainted by other people's experience. But when once you can get radically honest with the truth of your being, I really like saying this. There's a deeper and a different level of security and peace and authenticity that you get to explore and expand into. So I would like to invite you to experience that for yourself.
Okay, so then the seventh reminds us it's okay if our truth that like it's okay that our truth is different from everyone else's truth. And it's okay if our truth feels like it's changing right now for bigger, for more, for the collective, to understand the role that we're playing here. And I'm saying all of this because on Saturday, the 7th, that's a big day. We have Mars stationing in retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo, which is something that we touched a little bit on in the November overview. On the same day, we have Venus, who is in charge of love, relationships, worthiness, values, luxury, beauty, moving into Aquarius and going to meet Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And Pluto is so freshly there, right? Pluto kind of is still like, let's see, how can I handle this Aquarian territory? And Venus is like, oh, I'm here too. So I feel like this day actually would be a really great day to start setting more boundaries with ourselves, understanding what we need um, to create our heart, to share our heart. And I bring that up because Mars is going retrograde in Leo. Leo is responsible for the heart, for joy, for playfulness. And then Aquarius is opposite Leo and they're a polarity. So they're kind of both pertaining to this heart, this truth. How are we sharing our creativity? How are we sharing our, again, authentic expression? But maybe there's a break in sharing. I think this month is, if you feel like you don't want to share anything with anybody, this is a great month to do that. It's okay if you want to do that because what is Mars? Mars is our passion. It is the way we take action. It's the way we go for what we want. It's motivation. And with Mars stationing retrograde, we may feel like we don't want to take any action. Like Thea said, it's the archer, it's the pulling back of the arrow. So maybe we do know our truth. We know why we're doing what we're doing, but we feel this internal resistance. If you feel the internal resistance, know that you're not alone and you're not weird, because the astrology is inviting us to meet resistance so that we can see what comes up on the other side of resistance. I also find it so interesting that it's a day where the feminine, like Venus as the feminine, is moving forward into Aquarius and going into new territory. And the masculine, which is like in the heart space, is like, wait, I need a break. I need a break. Let me go back into my emotional space and see how that can translate into my heart space. What are you feeling for December 7? Why is it so huge?
It's really huge. Okay, so all the outer planets, they go retrograde once a year for 4 to 8 months. Mercury goes retrograde 3 times a year. Venus goes retrograde every year and 2 months, 584 days. Mars only goes retrograde every 2 years and change. So when Mars goes retrograde, here we are again with our heart space and our why. It's huge because it's a planet that doesn't go retrograde um, as often. And with Mars ruling our passion, our drive, our desire in Leo, where it's actually very comfortable to be in, the sun in Sagittarius, the sun rules Leo. And having just gone through that Cazimi, having just gone through that square with Saturn, it's really okay to hit the pause button. The thing with Mars going retrograde though is the more that we feel like we need to stop, the more urgency actually sets in, or at least the sense of urgency sets in where we need to do this. I need to like there's a certain level of chaos and urgency that ensues just because when planets station, that's when they're closest to the earth. And how I actually work with it and how this feels in my body when planets are closest to the earth, they feel like they're higher up. So the higher octave of Mercury is Uranus. So if you're feeling a lot of disruption, if you're getting a lot of surprises from nowhere, if you're feeling like, information just gets revealed to you from somewhere out of nowhere and the ground shakes from under your feet just because there's a certain higher octave to those planets because they're closest to us. The higher octave of Mars is Pluto. And we are in the midst of this longer cycle of Pluto and Mars opposing each other. So there's really a lot of contemplation around ego will, ego desire, and soul will, soul desire. My will versus collective will. My desire and my drive versus the higher drive and desire for my being here, my raison d'etre, like what is my reason for being here, my deeper why. And this retrograde of Mars gonna spend a long time in Leo, and then it's gonna go back to Cancer before it goes back to Leo again. So there's a lot of, I feel like, then what's coming to my body is how might we, since we're still in the midst of Mercury retrograde, understand or at least shift how we view Mars as Aries, god of war, with everything that's going on in the world, from defender to the warrior into a more Roman archetype of Mars, which is the protector, the masculine. That's so beautiful how you said it's the masculine container that actually gives space so that the feminine can be fluid, the feminine can be the oracle. That is the divine masculine. And there's this term that shamanic astrologer Andrea Michel calls the archaic feminine. It hit me. I really resonate with the archaic feminine. And when she talks about the archaic feminine, it's the feminine that is actually the story of the feminine before written history. And like all these books were written by him, right? It's history. And with Mars going back into Cancer, we can actually create her story and hold space, allowing our masculine to actually hold space for the her stories that are emerging, that are rising. And the type of masculine that actually protects than the kind of masculine that defends. And how might we, reconnect with these parts of ourselves and yeah, just soften, soften our exterior, lay down our armor, lay down our arms, and actually be a protector more than a defender. Is are the biggest themes that this Mars retrograde cycle is coming. Ah, words. These are the deeper themes that this Mars retrograde in Leo cycle is coming. Is bringing to my attention. God,
This is already us having invited Mercury.
I know.
But okay, so what you said brought up something for me, which is very interesting. And that is within the next few years, we have planets moving from feminine signs to masculine signs, right? We're going into the masculine full force. But I think it's so fascinating, like you said, with Mars moving back into Cancer and bringing back her story. Like it's almost like this is the final thing that needs to happen. Of course, there are so many final things that need to happen, but this is one of the many final things that need to happen before we shift into masculine territory. We kind of need to reclaim the feminine a little bit more. I know we've been doing it a lot, or like some of us have been doing it a lot in the last few years, but I think this is another time to dip back in. What are the stories that we've been told that actually aren't true at all? And I'm going to bring in an anecdote, which is how I studied poetry with Chelsea Diane, and she teaches all these women from history who have been kind of demonized. And we were told that they committed suicide, but actually they were killed. So that's happened so much. Being in this poetry class for the last almost 3 years, oh my God, the way my mind has like grown and become so aware of how many stories we've not been told the right way. We've been told in a way that's digestible, but actually the truth is not digestible. Maybe that's why the truth has been kept from us to keep us away from revolution. But here we are with Pluto at 0 degrees of Aquarius, Venus going into Aquarius. Revolution is loud. And as much as we maybe don't want to have wars or fights or anything like that, with Jupiter in Gemini, it's making the duality, the polarity so loud. So if you're seeing the polarity play out, this is your invitation to not get involved in it. Like be a witness and allow it to um, inform your perspective. And as much as possible, don't get into the heart of it because you don't want to be dealing with that much chaos if you don't need to. But if you want to, if you're the type of person that thrives on chaos, go ahead and do that. But if you feel like you're wanting to protect your peace a little bit more, stay out of it and just witness what's going on. And that witnessing in itself will just inform so much of what you do. And I want to move into the next day because this is another big day. This is a big first week
Week.
of the month. Yeah, because like later on it calms down a bit or like appears to calm down a bit. But it's actually the build up to a full moon in Gemini. But before we go there, let's go to the 8th of December. Moon is still going to be in Pisces. And hold on, sorry, let's go to the day before just very briefly with Mars. Mars is going to be retrograde from December 7 until February 24. On February 24, once Mars stations direct, Mars will be at 17 degrees of Cancer. So right now we have Mars at 6 degrees of Leo. So Mars is going to be moving back through 6 degrees of Leo. So we're going to feel those Leo themes of authenticity, of playfulness. Maybe we're feeling the lack of playfulness. Maybe we're telling ourselves we need to start being overly serious. And then we move back into Cancer territory where a lot of Thea and I were talking about. A lot of what Thea and I were talking about when we were talking about Mars in Cancer was making a home for our emotions, right? So I feel like Mars coming back into Cancer will be like, okay, so how's that home? Is it still standing or has it been broken down somehow? Has it been blown away by Pluto and Aquarius or like what's the story there? So till February 24 is when we have Mars in retrograde. Moving back to December 8th, Neptune stations direct at 17 degrees, 27 degrees, 7 minutes of Pisces. And Neptune has been retrograde since the 2nd of July. So that's nearly 5 months. That's about 5 months. And on the same day, we have the Sun opposite Jupiter, Sun in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Gemini, Neptune making things hazy. How do you feel
Mm.
about December 8th after that Sun square Pluto and then the Cazimi and then the next day Mars stationing retrograde and Venus moving into Aquarius and then the next day Neptune stationing direct.
Yeah, it's still the same, right? It sets us up with the Cazimi, and then that square to Saturn, and then that opposition to Jupiter. And I was talking about the kite early on, where the themes are just reminding us of our fantasy world. Neptune has a lot to do with our dreams, our fantasy, has a lot to do with religion, spirituality, mysticism. And with Saturn being there, mind you, this is the last time in our lifetime that Neptune will be in Pisces. We will never experience Neptune being in rulership again. So as Neptune transits and completes its cycle in Pisces, it's in the last decan, meaning it's in the last 10 degrees. This is where we really feel the compressed energy because we need to feel all of it before we graduate from it. I mean, we don't really graduate from it, but we enter a new territory in terms of Neptune. And with all these Pisces territory, we can feel and we can see, we can sense a lot of people coming back to faith, a lot of people going into spirituality or, you know, extra senses coming online, and then confusion ensues, or at least delusion ensues. So how have these themes been true for you, and how have they been playing out for you whilst Neptune was retrograde since July? There may be some sense of clarity because Neptune also, like, it brings where Neptune is, it brings some sense of mist or fog or confusion. It can also bring so much faith and hope and dreaminess and delusions. I mean, delusions as a word is loudness. There may be some sense of clarity as Neptune station direct. And again, when planets station, they are closest to us. And an invitation here to open up to a different kind of love. And the kind of love that I want to bring up here is self love, like a love that brings you back to the source of you. We were talking about the heart of the matter, right? So, what is your source of love? And how might you resource love from that place instead of resourcing love from outside of you, which I think is also becoming a theme with the nodes in Libra and Aries. Like a lot of relationships have ended, a lot of new relationships are beginning. A lot of people are reassessing the kinds of relationships that they have with themselves and other people. So with the strong theme here, and especially on that day, the moon is also in Pisces, and um, there's not much other aspect I see aside from the longer aspect that we were already talking about. So how might we resource love and security from ourselves here, and how might we remember to come back home to that? We talked about creating a home for our emotions, but bigger than that is how might we create that bigger home for ourselves and our love? Because as the second half of the decade enters in, we we are always going to need to come back to that home space and that heart space and resource from there and allow that wellspring of love and compassion and kindness to overflow. And so I think the past years, and especially this year, we were really taught to attend to the fountain, attend to the water source, because we need to resource from this space. Um, the decade, the next decade.
I love that. I think another theme for this day, not actually this day, but just beginning then or beginning forever, is to be teachable. I think it's so important to be teachable. And the reason I bring that up is that day we have Sun opposite Jupiter. Sun is in Sagittarius, Jupiter is in Gemini. These are both signs. It's the sign, Sag is the sign of the teacher, and Gemini is the sign of the student. And we're always playing in this. For a while we're the teacher, and then we're the student, and then we're the teacher. But I feel like with this one, it's like become a student to life, become a student to love, become a student to spirituality, and notice how your life changes. Become a student that is so filled with devotion for your own life. Like, create your life like it's your dream life, because it really is your dream life. The only thing that's getting in your way, or my way, or any of our ways, is our own self. So this is a great day actually to look at how have we been getting in our own self, in our own way, especially while Neptune was retrograde. Um, how have we been stopping ourselves from actually achieving the things that we want, because maybe we've just been foggy. We've been in a haze. How can we allow that haze to lift so that we can see things more clearly, more creatively? I also want to bring up that Neptune also houses escapism. And so, us becoming aware of how are we escaping from what feels uncomfortable? How can we allow more discomfort in our lives? How can we allow more bandwidth for discomfort? Because with a lot of shifts, with a lot of the bigger planets shifting, there is going to be a lot of discomfort. And like we said, there is this feeling of resistance this month with, and next month with, and also February with Mars being retrograde. So it's like
With
become.
forever.
It's like become comfortable with being uncomfortable. We're so used to being in our comfort zones. We're so used to wanting to be held. And I mean, this is already a message from Uranus in Taurus for this whole time, right? That's been like, become comfortable in chaos, become comfortable being uncomfortable. Because once Uranus moves into Gemini, oh my God, there is no saying the discomfort that we can feel there, for the sake of beauty. I mean, for the sake of more relationships, for the sake of networking, for the sake of technology, but still, like, Gemini is a lot. And we're seeing it now with Jupiter and Gemini. Gemini is a lot. So just be teachable, is all I'm saying. Like, notice how teachable you are feeling. And then on the 10th, we're finally at the 10th. We're on, on the 10th. We have Sun in Sagittarius, sextile Lilith in Libra. How does it feel?
Ooh, I feel like this is a day with all those review, all the feels, all the contraction and the expansion. Um, Venus also in Aquarius. Now, how can we talk liberation? We have talked about how we deconditioning ourselves from our beliefs, deconditioning from our own sets of conditionings. How might we use this into like a grander calling of, collective liberation? And this is something that I always say, the collective starts with I. There is no revolution or liberation without involution. And that's also something that we are learning with Uranus and Taurus, which you brought up. And but with Lilith there's a lot of truths, new versions of truth that are needing to be liberated. And it gets liberated through our bodies, through the feminine aspects and the feminine parts of all of us. And this textile is a beautiful opportunity. As with textiles, there's action that's needing to be done or needing to be, like there is necessary action that you need to take. And so we start that with ourselves first. What are these repressed parts and raw truths that you have actually been suppressing and that you are now actually learning to reintegrate? How might you create more space for that? Because the more you share these truths, however eccentric, however weird, however out of the box they are valuable. They are valuable for collective consciousness to expand into new territory and give other people new perspectives. And gosh, we just need a lot of perspectives nowadays as we create new things. And don't be afraid to break eggs. Kind of need to break eggs to make, whatever egg dish you want to make. So,
You need to
Lilith
break eggs
teaches,
to make scrambled egg.
or I don't know, what else do you make eggs with? Bake, cake.
Bake cake. Well, you need eggs for a lot of things. You need it for pancakes, you need it for eggs, you need it for cookies, brownies.
You have to break the eggs first, right? And it takes a certain level of um stepping up, owning this unique truth, and allowing ourselves to be, what is this word? Exiled. Being comfortable. I like how you said being comfortable, learning how to be comfortable in the discomfort. I feel like with this textile is learning how to be comfortable in your exile, because it's actually when we start getting exiled from the places where we've been conditioned as home and safety. We were talking about home with Mars and Cancer, that we get to explore that there is actually a different kind of heaven that we can create when we're not bound into a certain structure or framework of what Eden or heaven is supposed to look like.
Um, you saying involution makes me think about a word that Dr. Michelle Patrick, she's a TCM practitioner. She says this word understand, which I love so much. Like, imagine if every time we said, I need you to understand this, instead of that, imagine if we said, I need you to understand this. Because understand, you're kind of putting yourself under. You're kind of making yourself also feel inferior because you have to understand it. Versus understand, it feels so much more embodied. I don't know. Anyway, your involution just brought that up. So I think it's a great time to also practice or experiment using the word understand and involution, and see how that feels. See how, because I feel like, with retrogrades, a lot of times we're doing the re words. Um, but with this Mars retrograde, I think it's a lot of working on our heart space, working on our womb, working with our emotions. And so, how can we shift a lot of things to, instead of being about external stuff, again, being about internal
Mm.
stuff, asking ourselves for our validation. Stop looking at the likes, stop looking at the comments. If you get comments, fun. If you get likes, fun. But does it matter to you? If it matters to you, that's the only reason you need to share it. If it doesn't matter to you, there's absolutely no reason you should be sharing it. Like, no reason that you should be putting your brain in something that you have zero business with, when there are so many places that your brain is being pulled from, especially around this time. Okay, next day on the 11th, we have Sun in Sagittarius, trining Chiron in Aries, and the same day the moon is in Aries too. This feels nice. It feels fiery. I feel like it feels like it's bringing me back to what I said on the 5th. It feels like a good day to look at your beliefs and look at how childhood beliefs are stopping you from expanding, are stopping you from actually doing what you want to do, are stopping you from empowering other people. I think, oh my God, you guys, if you're a woman and you're listening to this, women have been pitted against women for so freaking long. This is a great time with Lilith and Libra, especially, to reclaim the relationships within women. Because I feel like when we have women in our lives that are artists, that are creative, that are doing everything that they can to really just share their hearts with the world, we realize that it's okay to be triggered sometimes, because being triggered is what allows us to create better art. And it also teaches us how to become more expansive, how to be able to hold so many more polarities within ourselves. Like, another little anecdote, I feel like right now, through Chelsea's community, through the Poems and Power community, I've met so many strong, independent, powerful women that are doing so many beautiful things with their lives. And I'm thinking how I love being surrounded by these women, because they're artists. And the thing with artists is, artists have such big thoughts and such big beliefs. And a lot of times we can have differing beliefs from people that have big beliefs. But as artists, we're able to hold so many polarities, and we're able to explain to each other with grace, with love, why we believe what we believe, not trying to get anyone else to believe what we believe, but just for the sake, again, of perspective, for the sake of knowing more. Jupiter and Gemini, it feels so freaking good to surround ourselves with people that we can learn from rather than, I mean, high side of Jupiter and Gemini, people that you can learn from. Low side of Jupiter and Gemini, gossip. What do you choose?
Mm. And that you always have the power to choose. Like, you always have the power to choose.
Yeah. What else do you feel with this 11th Sun trine Chiron? Anything else?
Oh my gosh, I feel like this whole retrograde, Mercury retrograde cycle with that aspect to Chiron just empowers us to, like, this whole month is a cosmic invitation to reassess and rewrite, the conditions that we've allowed our wounds and our traumas to paint the lens, how we actually approach and dance with life. And I like how this Mars retrograde is also in a trine with the North Node in Aries. And this whole season where we've had the North Node in Aries is such an invitation to just be so free in owning our spark. And we have to start, like, take ownership for our independence, our individuality, our I am. And this am and this I that we are actually embodying and just, radically own up to it. And I think we've talked about this in great detail. What are the stories that you've told yourself? What are the conditionings and the superstitions that you've allowed yourself to believe all this time? This is a beautiful month to reorganize our relationship with our traumas. And I think, I don't remember if we talked about this before, like, reframe how we actually brag about our traumas. There's beauty in shining the light of awareness that we do have such traumas, but there's a different way when we're actually bragging about them and we keep bringing them up. The way we keep bringing them up just reinforces their story. So how might we bring them up in such a way where we've reconciled the parts of us that are actually in that, still in that protector mode, and just embrace and allow those trauma stories to be there at the same time, right? Jupiter and Gemini, we're also recreating new stories. It's not that we're choosing not to, um, it's not like we're choosing to sever our ties from these traumas, because they are part of us too. They made us who we are. They make us who we are. We are who we are now because of these stories too. But hold them, allow them, accept them while recreating. I think that's the whole part of the reconciliation process that Saturn and Pisces is also teaching us. It's dissolving the walls within ourselves that actually separate us from the story of our trauma, and just allowing the story to be there without the story taking over, the new stories and the new life that we're here to create.
All right. So moving into the 15th, we are at the full moon of the month. It is a full moon in Gemini, 23 degrees, 52 minutes. It's at 5:01 p.m. Philippine time. How close is it to Jupiter? Where is Jupiter at?
15 Gemini.
Pretty close. Jupiter is definitely informing this Gemini full moon. Full moons are completions, they're times of celebration. They're also times to release what is not serving, especially with regards to the intentions that we've set at the beginning of the month. How are you feeling about the Gemini full?
We've been talking about dreams and delusions for a while now. This full moon is in a square to Neptune, so it can feel really dreamy. If it does feel dreamy, oh my gosh, dream. Please, by all means, dream. Because we need new sea dreams as we progress again the second half of the decade. It can be a roller coaster ride. This is something that I always say. It's 2020. This decade is actually 2020 plus. So if this year is 2020 plus 4, we are entering 2020 plus 5. I'll leave it at that. So dream. Use this full moon to shine the light of awareness into the dreams that you set, the visions that you set on the new moon, and take strategic action how to actually adjust that. Because new moons are also time for, yes, release, celebration, letting go, but a lot to do with adjustment and re-strategy. So how might we use that? Because we're closing the year. We're closing so many things. We're ending so many things, but we're also holding space for so many beginnings. And I feel like there's an invitation for the lot of us who are alive during this time and are doing deeper work to be, and I'm not sure if this is something that I mentioned in this podcast, is we are both birth doulas and death doulas. We are hospicing death as much as we are midwifing life. So it's a both end, right? Jupiter and Gemini. And this full moon, I feel like, levels up the tone because it's a full moon that's ruled by Jupiter and Gemini. So how are we expanding our bandwidth to hold both death and life at the same time? Because we are in unexpanded time, a revolutionary expanded time in the history of our species. It's big.
It's huge. I think something else also is in line with what you said. It's noticing what are the polarities that we have been holding strongly within us. And if we've been so deep on one side of it, how can we start introducing the other side? Because Gemini is the sign of both end. It is the sign of the twins. It's the sign of the dualities. And I love how you said it's a time of kind of, re-strategizing, because it's also that Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury on this full moon is still retrograde. And so it's really a time of also becoming very aware of your words again, like write things down. This full moon, I think, is a great day to write things down. Write maybe. I think it's such a good day to just free write, like free write, and then go back and read what you wrote, and then notice the words that come up again and again. Because a lot of times when we're thinking, it's like hard to kind of notice our patterns. But when we write them out or when we talk to someone about them, we start being like, oh, I said this quite a few times. So, practical tip for this day: free write your dream life, free write where you're not currently living your dream life, where you can be living your dream life, and then just notice the words that are coming up so that you can use more powerful words. That's the only reason that we're saying, like, notice your words. It's so that you can use words that are in deeper resonance with your body and with your heart, because that way it's that much easier. Again, a buzzword that we all love to use, it's that much easier to manifest what we're trying to manifest. Okay, on the next day, so it's like Mercury just wanted to stay retrograde for the full moon, because on the next day Mercury stations direct at 6 degrees of Sagittarius. How do you feel about this? And also, I want to point out that this 6 degree mark has been interesting. On the 7th, Mars stationed retrograde at 6 degrees, 6 degrees 10 minutes, but 6 degrees of Leo. And then now we have Mercury stationing direct at 6 degrees 23 minutes of Sagittarius. So both fire, both 6 degrees. How do you
Yes,
feel?
and I would like to bring in Venus also. That Venus retrograded in Leo too. So we have a fire over story for our heart, Venus, the way we love, the way we magnetize things. And then Mars, which is how we actually move towards those that we desire, and Mercury, how we think, how we communicate that which we desire. So with all our personal planets in retrograding in fire signs, specifically Leo for Venus and Mars, this is a beautiful time. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful next couple of days to, um, like Arena said, I think free write, that's such a beautiful way to articulate, which is a Mercury, Venus, and Mars action. Articulate what you've been going through, but more importantly, how you're allowing yourself to play into the stage that is your life. And what have you allowed? Like, what parts of you have you dimmed so that you're not allowing yourself to fully express and play in that stage? With Venus retrograde, we're still in an overall Venus Leo cycle. And then Mars starting a Leo overstory. There's really a lot to do with how we take ownership for that, for our light, the light that we share, the light that we shine, the light that we don't share, and the light that we don't shine. And I have been sitting with this beautiful song, The Blackbird by Paul McCartney. And so I guess an invitation to listen to this song because to me, it expresses that there is darkness in the light and that we needed the dark time. We need the dark time for us to be able to fully express in the full range and capacity of our light. And I actually just I want to stop there and give voice to you because I see you saying yes.
I'm thinking about I'm thinking about college because this song, Blackbird, the first time I heard it was college in Boston, and I'm trying to remember the story behind it, whether it was someone that was just constantly singing it, or whether I feel like I had a dream, or one of my best friends at that time was singing it to me as I was sleeping. And so it's such a funny memory in my mind, and as I'm recalling this memory, I'm feeling different parts of my head kind of activate. So maybe that is my message for this Mercury stationing direct. Allow parts of your head or your brain that haven't been activated to activate by maybe thinking about the past, thinking about the future, thinking about the possibilities, thinking about the feelings. How did it feel to be at a certain place? Like, can you imagine? I'm thinking about someone that I cared for dearly singing this song, and it's having like the back of my head become lighter. Like, as humans, we're freaking magicians. So it's like, why don't we start using the magic that we have? Just because we don't have a wand, it doesn't mean that we're not capable of magic.
Also, I like how it's so visceral for you from a neuroscience perspective. Like the part of the brain that actually is activated, like the nostalgia part of the brain is on the back. And so for you to
So
actually
cool.
the back of your head with some tingling sensations because it's lighting up that part of your
Yeah,
brain.
that is so cool. That's so cool. Yeah, so you guys, if you're listening to this, you're more psychic than you think. And I think
Mhm.
that with Neptune finally going direct, you're gonna feel your psychic abilities more. Maybe while Neptune was retrograde, you were feeling it more again in a kind of foggy, hazy way,
Mhm.
versus now maybe it's a little more clear. It's a direct line of truth to your psychic
Mm.
knowing, to your intuition. Okay, moving into and what I have to say about Mercury going direct is just play, continue playing, and again with Sagittarius with fire, it's about inspiring, it's about empowering, it's about breaking boundaries, and it's either we're doing it for ourselves or doing it for others. And at this time, I think it's a great time to do it for ourselves, especially since Mercury is just coming out of a retrograde and Mars is in retrograde during this time. The next aspect that's happening, or the next important aspects, are on the 18th, where Lilith in Libra is opposite Chiron in Aries, and the Sun in Sagittarius squares Pisces, um, Neptune in
Yeah.
Pisces. How do you feel about this day?
I
Coming
think
down
it's
from
still
the
a
full moon, too.
continuation. Yeah, I think it's still a continuation of what we said. I think like all these transits are a buildup of one another. I think this is also something that we talked about. And the thing with astrology is if there's a pattern that we see come up once, it usually comes in threes. And when they come in threes, it's just to reinforce that this is the cosmic invitation for that particular period in time. And so we've been talking a lot about liberation. We've been talking about our dreams, using our dream seeds to create new stories of liberation, deconditioning from our past stories, expanding the bounds of our known reality, and then grounding us into this version of reality, exploring, all these exiled parts within ourselves, being comfortable in the exiled parts so that we can, be like just expand our bandwidth to hold the fullness of our range. That's what Lilith reminds us, I feel like, with all these dances with Chiron and all this Neptune and Pisces just dissolving all the boundaries between reality and fantasy is we are bringing up the exiled and suppressed parts of especially the feminine into this new reality where after thousands of years, 3,000 years, we've allowed some dominating aspect of society and culture to dictate how we're actually being in the world. There's a new story that's being weaved, and we are the ones who's weaving that. But for us to be able to weave that more fruitfully, we need to free and liberate so many repressed parts of ourselves. And that's what Lilith is reminding us. And prior to this, Lilith has been dancing with Pluto. And so we have gone through the transformation. We have reclaimed and we are continuously reclaiming the feminine. It's the part now where we are each responsible to liberate the feminine parts within ourselves, the exiled feminine, wild feminine parts within ourselves, and give it space, give it a stage to play. And like these retrogrades in Leo and fire signs, it's having a different relationship with our fire, knowing that it can burn, but it can also give life, right? The both end and the duality again. That's what's coming.
I'm not going to add anything to that. I'm going to have us jump to the 21st, which is the day of the winter solstice. And that is the day that the sun moves into Capricorn. That's happening at 5:21 p.m. Philippine time on a day that the moon is in Virgo. So this is a very, I feel like, grounded welcome to Capricorn season because we have a lot of undertones of fire. We have a lot of undertones of air. And so this is a very welcome place to introduce some earth, some grounding, some integration. You know, there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of things going on up here. But I think once the sun moves into Capricorn, it will be a lot more felt. It'll be a lot more integrated, but not before I think a break, because it is a winter solstice. Winter is the darkest time of the year. It is the time to go inward, even though outside over here it's the same when it's winter and summer, but internally, I think it's this invitation to feel deeper, what like feel everything that's been going on through the year a little bit deeper and integrate the changes that need to be made. How do you feel about Capricorn season?
I like how you brought up integration and reintegration again, because Capricorn to me is um it's the mermaid. It's the mermaid and it's the ancestor. And I feel like as we approach the dead of winter in one side of the world and then also the peak of summer and the other side of the world, this is where we get to understand why we needed to go through why we needed to go deep and why we need to come back up whenever we need to go deep. We don't stay in the depths. We also don't stay in the heights. We, we dance and weave in between the dark and the light. And again, the song Blackbird is coming in my head like we have been waiting. You have been waiting for this moment to arrive. And we have all just been waiting for this moment to rise. And always with Capricorn is remembering that we have the wisdom within us. We are the deep elder as much as we are the teacher, as much as we are the student. It's remembering the parts of us who already hold that ancient wisdom, because all the ancient wisdom, again, the archaic feminine is coming back online, but it has to come back online through our bodies. And hopefully with this comprehensive guide, I mean, we went through comprehensively the first few days of December. Hopefully we reach this solstice, which is the standstill part and time of the year where we are allowing ourselves to stand still to notice the wisdom that we have actually gained from the last 12 months and to just stand still in that moment because there is no rush, right? We are not needing to rush towards the next grand thing, the next grand adventure. It is Christmas time. So it's a trip to not rush when we're actually when our culture and society gives us these holiday schedules where we are rushing from one place to another, one reunion, one event to another. So again, the both end. How might we incorporate the standing still? How might we um, take the time to notice and celebrate the wisdom that we've gained, all the things that had to happen for this moment to arrive and to rise into the occasion is my invitation for this day.
Capricorn kind of feels like dragonfly energy as well, having lived in the water and having lived in the air, having lived in both. And I love this reminder that like we can go to the top of the mountain, but we cannot stay at the top of the mountain, and we can go to the deepest trenches within us, but we cannot stay in the deepest trenches within us. And also I want to offer this invitation to people, especially who say, I can't go deep, I can't think deep, that's too deep for me. A reminder that it can't be too deep for you, because within you, you have the depths and you have the shallow waters. And if you really wanted to, you can go deep. But again, it's a matter of choice, right? But it's also like it's okay to choose that you don't want to go deep. But I feel like don't ever say you don't have the ability to go deep, because as humans, we have the ability to do anything and everything that we can remind ourselves that we're capable of. That's one thing. The second thing, when, especially because we're talking about Earth, when Earth comes into the picture, I feel like something that's so important is boundaries. So, Thea was talking about Christmas season and all these things that are required from us during Christmas season, from friends, from family, from whatever you have that's demanding stuff of you. Remember to set your boundaries. Like, it's okay to go all out, it's okay to have fun, but just know your own boundaries. Know when you're trying to push yourself in a way that doesn't feel good anymore. I know we said you have to be okay with being uncomfortable, but don't be okay with purposely making yourself uncomfortable when you know that it's the kind of discomfort that you really would rather not have. Because it's not like, at this point, we're not talking about dealing with discomfort from our own bodies. We're talking about dealing with discomfort from hanging out with other people that maybe we don't see eye to eye with. And that can just activate this Jupiter in Gemini, which is like, if we have nothing in common to talk about, we might start talking about other people. You want to talk about other people? Like, set your boundaries. I think it's just such an important time to set boundaries with the sun in Capricorn, especially considering how much we are trying to grow, especially through this Sagittarius season. There's so much about growth, there's so much about expansion. So when Capricorn season comes, how can we set the foundation, set the boundaries so that we can continue expanding rather than feeling like we need to contract? Moving on to the 23rd, Sun in, and we're almost done here actually, Sun in Capricorn is going to be squaring the North Node in Aries. Last month, I talked about how I love when planets make aspects to the nodes, because it just feels like such a big time of um, like such a big opportunity of change. I see a little green insect on my sunflower, which I haven't seen all day, but now it has appeared. And this is an insect that jumps. So I feel like that's it. This is an opportunity to jump. It's an opportunity to time hop. It's an opportunity to become so clear about what your purpose is with that why again. And really, like, I think keep that as your truest true, keep that as your deepest deep, and allow that to inform everything that you do. That same day we have the moon in Libra, so I'm sure that Lilith will come to play as well. But how do you feel about the sun squaring the north node?
Destiny is on our side. I feel like this is the day to um, plan out. And I have been using strategy a couple of times this podcast too. With Mars retrograde, I really feel like it's a season for strategy. And right after solstice, we get a square to the nodes. And mind you, this is before the nodes shift sign. And with the North Node being in Aries, it's really about allowing ourselves to shine brightly. Like, again, like taking full responsibility and ownership for our I am, whatever form, shape this am and this I is taking up for you. This is a beautiful cosmic support. It's giving you a helping to really allow yourself to form the kind of person or project that you want to launch and relaunch into after the retrograde season. So although it's a square and squares are known to be a tense aspect, it's very supportive because it's with the nose. So whatever you want to, um, and this really has a lot to do with who you are as a person, like the identity, the kind of identity that you are allowing yourself to own or not own. And we've been talking about a lot about disowned parts and exiled parts. This is, I think we were needing to talk about those things so that we come into this day reorganized, realigned, re-strategized, and reinvigorated to have a sense of bigger self agency or a deeper self agency to relaunch ourselves by next year.
Okay, so on the 25th, we have Jupiter in Gemini squaring Saturn in Pisces. This is what you were talking about earlier. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel like it's just a continuation. We've been in this. We've been in this for a while. This is the second time that these guys are squaring. But on the second square, Jupiter is retrograde. So there's a lot of internal um introspect that's happening here. And I think like all these transits and all like the days leading up to this, we've already been doing a lot of that. And Gemini and Pisces to me is really a lot about an exploration of the ways that we have been using our words to communicate our beliefs. And so with this square, like what have we learned? What have we learned the past 3 months while, the first square was in action? This is actually like the second square with Saturn already direct. There is a kind of accountability and a kind of responsibility and realignment that is needing to happen. So this isn't new territory. We've been here before. How are we taking responsibility for it's a question of how now are we taking responsibility for it and how have we grown? How have we matured from it what's coming up for me. What's coming up for you?
I mean, similar to what's coming up for you, and I feel like it's a day again that we're reminded of our depths and our ability to hold a lot more than we feel like we can hold because that day the moon is in Scorpio as well.
Mhm.
So I feel, yeah, it's just a reminder of our depths. And when we feel like we can't anymore, it's a reminder that we still can because we're human and we have grit and we've gone through Sagittarius season by that time and we know our capability and we know that we're able to do so much more. So I feel like this is a day where we're reminded that we're tested, but we're reminded that, we can do what we
Mhm.
believe we can do. Which leads us to the 30th. And this is the day that Chiron stations direct in Aries. So Chiron has been retrograde since July 26th. So this is a welcome. Is it welcome? I think this is a welcome aspect because with Chiron retrograde, a lot of the trauma, a lot of the wounding, I think, has been internalized. And maybe we feel like it's just been going round and round, versus this is a great day to kind of just channel it outward, not share it outward, not really talk about your trauma like it's, um, I don't know, a talk to give to people, but instead, like, use it, turn it into medicine, like we were talking about earlier, and channel it to the world because I mean, Aries is a fire starter. Aries empowers. Aries is all about our identity. And so maybe this is a good day to start becoming clear about what is your identity without the trauma. Like, what is your identity without your wounds? Yes, it's okay that you have wounds. And yes, you have wounds. We all have wounds. We're all human. We're all put to the test. But it's also an invitation to kind of channel it in a different way and become aware that, yes, you are made of wounds, but you're also made of creativity. If you're focusing on the wounds, that's what's going to come. If you're focusing on creativity and firing yourself up and firing more people up, that's what's going to come as well. How do you feel?
I like that. I like everything that you said. And I'm also seeing that Pluto is sextile the North Node on that day. And the North Node would be on 1 degree, the first degree of Aries. And that's the fullness. That's baby Aries. It's the fullness of Aries because it's the first degree. And it's this thing with Chiron. When we have a Chiron complex, it actually teaches us that where our wounds are also lies our greatest medicine. So I think that was so beautiful what Karina said. Everyone has trauma. We literally came into this world being spanked first so that we cry. Most of us came into the world crying. So at the first breath, we already have trauma. So it's allowing how our wounds are also the way we distill the medicine that we offer other people. Because where Chiron is in our chart, and this is an invitation, where is Chiron in your chart and how are you playing out this Chiron complex? Because where we are so deeply wounded gives us the impetus to be that wounded healer for another person. And with this Pluto sextile the North Node, there is a collective movement that's being invited for us. Like I really like this Marianne Williamson quote. We are each responsible for the healing of our world. And we don't really heal. I mean, we came into this earth school to learn how to be wounded, but also embody being human. So as long as we are here, we will always have trauma. That's just part of being in a globe that's held together by two poles. But what I'm trying to say here is everything that we experienced to this point, we needed to experience so that we can help the collective. And it isn't just about us anymore. As much as we do identify and individualize, we need that individualized work so that we can come in coherence with a grander collective story. And it's beautiful how we're ending 2020 plus 4 with an invitation that we all have a responsibility for a collective healing and collect whatever it is that we envision for the collective. So what is it for you? And your wounds are actually the key.
I love how you're saying this while Venus is also in Aquarius. And we end the year with Venus in Aquarius, remembering that it is for us, but it's also for the collective. We're all pieces of a puzzle, and the puzzle is this world. And we can paint our piece however we want it to look. It's not up to anyone other than us. And if you feel like your decisions are up to someone else, that's your first step once Chiron stations direct. Take back autonomy, take back the authority of your own life, and make sure your decisions, the answers to your decisions, are coming from yourself. Like, it's okay to get perspective, it's okay to get advice, it's okay to get opinions, but at the end of the day, make sure you have your own back. Make sure you have your own say. Okay, Thea, we're moving to the last day of the whole year. I mean, it's fitting that this is pretty long. It is the last, we're not only summarizing the month, we're pretty much summarizing this entire year, which is great, which has been crazy. But I want to ask you something before we go into the new moon, which is when do the nodes shift?
It'll shift around January. It'll shift to Pisces, Virgo.
Hmm.
So we do have the last month in this Aries North Node energy. And as I bring us into the new moon, I would like to invite everyone to remember where we were in April. Because I think that solar eclipse, we only had one solar eclipse. Um, and that was in Aries. So what was happening for you in April? What were the lessons? What were the initiations that were coming up for you in April? And as we close this year with a new moon, how might we use those lessons to bring us into better self agency, autonomy? I like how you said autonomy as we enter the next year. This new moon in grounded, practical, solid Capricorn, an invitation to be rigid enough to give yourself structure to ground your dreams, but also loose enough for magic to still happen. Right? Again, both end. And um I think it's just pretty fitting for a year to start with a new moon because it's such a grand new beginning. I feel like this fresh energy that December is gifting us with a lot of introspection, involution, just sets up the stage for us to really start fresh and anew by come New Year, or at least the Gregorian New Year.
Yeah, so the new moon is on the 31st at 9 degrees 43 minutes, and it's at 6:26 a.m. Philippine time. What I find fascinating is we begin the month with a new moon at 9 degrees of Sagittarius, and we end the month with a new moon at 9 degrees of Capricorn, really rooting in. So when I'm thinking of numbers, I like to think of it in terms of the tarot, and usually in the tarot, 9 is like appreciating all that we have. It's like having everything, because 10 is carrying more than we're able to carry. So here we are at a completion, however you want to take it. Become aware of what is this completion that's happening for you. Or maybe it's not even a completion, maybe it's just a beginning. But this is a packed month filled with opportunity for integration, opportunity for expansion, opportunity looking at our inner worlds, opportunities with our wounds, opportunities turning our wounds into medicine, and of course, opportunities to change the way we are communicating with the universe and communicating about our lives. And it's a great opportunity to take our lives back into our own hands and become aware of the stories that we are witnessing play out, and become aware of the stories that we are injecting ourselves into when we don't even need to be part of that story. I think this is a great month to take our peace back, to become more aware of where we're overextending ourselves, to, of course, reflect on the last year. What are the biggest lessons that you learned? I think it's great when you also write a month by month, like January last year, this is what happened. February last year, this is what happened. March last year, you get the drift. But it's a great idea, I think, just so that we're able to kind of track our years a little bit better. And it will give you some perspective about actually how much you've grown. Because a lot of times we're looking at what we can be doing better or what we didn't do. Recording it this way might show you how much you actually have done, which will allow so much compassion for yourself, which will allow you to dream bigger, which will allow you to integrate more deeply. So everything leads to another. Be wise about how you spend this month. It's the last month of the year. Be wise about how you spend next year. And thank you, Thea, for joining me for another month overview. It is always my honor chatting with you. We go long, and the reason that we go long is because we love talking to each other, and also we want you to understand. We want you to understand. Like, we don't want to just be like this square this. That's it. That means nothing to you. And our purpose here is for you to understand the astrology a little bit deeper. So if you are still here, thank you for listening to us. Share with us what days feel extra special for you, how they're landing in your body. If you want someone to reflect with about your year, I'm actually thinking of putting up some year end readings, where we can just sit and reflect on your year. So let's see how that feels. I might do that. How about you? Anything coming up for you, or anything you want to say to end this podcast?
Yeah, it's such an honor too to share this space with you, to have this space with you, and be allowed to go deep into the astrology as we root and embody what's actually happening above. For me, I am truly taking this time to introspect and involve more into the present moment. There has been a lot of evolution and initiations for me this year, and I'm just really, truly looking forward to relaunch and relaunch and reintegrate into a new version of myself. I just turned 40. It really doesn't feel like it. Time is such a warp. And I feel like 40 is such a milestone year, but also 4 is such a feminine year. So let's see. Thank you for having me here. And thank you everyone if you're still here.
Thank you for being here. Happy birthday. Always an honor to chat with you. I am so grateful. You guys, will catch you on the January overview 2025. Here we come. I hope you have a beautiful month.